I had gotten off course as a young leader, and I got myself in trouble, some poor decisions, a bad call on a mission in Afghanistan, and I hit rock bottom. I was confronted with, hey, we are thinking about taking your Trident. And that really became the severing point from a lot of my teammates. That guy's dangerous. He's going to get us killed.
Yeah. So now you have to rebuild yourself.
How do you reestablish credibility? How do you build back reputations? The reality is it's never too late. Because I convinced myself in that moment, if I didn't have that Trident, my life was over. I was sitting like this with my gun in my mouth, getting ready to pull the trigger, and I looked across the desk and there was a picture of my wife and kids. God kind of smacked me in the back of the head and he said, what message are you going to send your kids if you take your life in Afghanistan?
Rebuilding your career, rebranding yourself, and now you're an officer, you're a leader, and taking a team to Iraq.
It was direct action, capture, kill missions. For me, the other thing was, hey, I messed up in combat. I now need to redeem myself in combat. For guys to believe in me, it was the last check in the box for me to get my career back on track. So when I was wounded, they said I stood up to move back, and that's when I caught a round in the face. The first week I got home, I was a little angry. I had come back, redeemed myself, and now I'm all shot up. I can relate now so much to fire, military, law enforcement. We tie ourselves so tightly to the emblems and the badges that when you're faced unexpectedly with losing it, it's your entire identity.
And it's dangerous.
For me, that leadership failure set me up for success in my injuries. There's no doubt about it.
All right, guys. Hey, welcome back. I've been watching back my episodes and I always say super pumped. So I'm intentionally trying to say that I'm not super pumped, but I am super pumped to have Jason here. If you guys don't know Jason Redman, become a friend of mine. We actually had a history before we knew it. There was this history between us. We kind of had this similar paths, besides the fact that I wasn't shot in the head. But
that's the part you want to avoid anyways.
But
no one says that's no one has that as a bucket list item.
Yeah, I did not want that to happen, and unfortunately did for you. And we're gonna talk about that. But one of the things, the way I first heard about you is I was doing this. We started speaking probably around the same time. We actually joined the military the same year. But I started speaking and my talk was get off the X.
Yeah.
And somebody said, hey, it's this other guy doing this speech, get off the X. I'm like, who's this guy? Like stole my, and then I'm like, seeing who you were. I'm like, oh man, this guy actually knows about getting off the X.
Yeah.
And I'm like, he's probably thinking I'm stealing his thing. But we started with the same speech title, right?
It's a special operations term. It's a military term. So I've never tried to claim, hey, this is mine. Obviously, I speak a lot about it. It's a core part of the Overcome book. But
it was just amazing because we were not only the same title, but the theme of the message was the same about people, our time in Afghanistan and Iraq, learning about getting off the X in combat and relating it to everyday life about people stuck on the X in life and learning how to get off the X and move forward in their lives. And so that's how we first got connected. And then we've done so many things. I was involved in Afghan evacs through Task Force 6-8 and Save Our Allies, and you were involved through Pineapple Express. And we both speak, and we both kind of encourage other leaders and in the entrepreneur space. And so we become friends over the years, and I'm just super excited to have you here on the show. I'll say I'm super pumped. But I want everybody else to know who you are, so I want to read your bio.
Okay.
Jason Redman is the epitome of a wounded warrior. A retired Navy SEAL officer who served in both Iraq and Afghanistan. Jason is a Purple Heart recipient and was awarded a Bronze Star for Valor on the battlefield. You're also a New York Times best-selling author, highly sought-after international speaker, entrepreneur, and coach. You teach a broad range of leaders and individuals how to overcome mindset and how it's helped you to rise above a leadership failure, devastating enemy ambush, life-changing injuries, and even a debilitating business crisis. And last but not least, you're a husband, you're a father, and you're the owner of a family pet pig named Winston, who you've been trying to kill and eat for a while, but you've been unsuccessful.
I know, man. My daughter she's like, it'd be no different than eating the dog. And I'm like, I'm sorry, babe. There is a big difference. Bacon is good.
If you guys listening don't know about it, you got to go and Jason's Instagram. There's this kind of theme of him trying to kill his daughter's pet pig, and eat it.
She just keeps blocking me.
Man, again, super awesome to have you on. Before we get started, I want to thank our sponsors. We have amazing sponsors to make this show possible, to allow to get you here. So we got some gifts from some of those companies. I don't have it here with me, obviously, but Bio Accelerator down in Columbia offered for you to go down there. So if you have any physical ailments. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with what they do, but the UFCs, a lot of UFC fighters go down there, NFL players. They're like the premier company when it comes to the state-of-the-art stem cell therapy. I've been down there. I'm about to go back, and it's absolutely incredible. And they're willing to take care of you.
I'd love to learn more. I'm always interested in learning more. I mean, as we get older, how do we optimize? I've asked God, will he let me stay around until 80? I want to be optimized. So things like that are fascinating to me.
You want to be 80, you want to be highly functional.
Well, that's the thing.
Crushing the place, crushing the world 80.
Yeah. Oh, 100%, man.
Yeah. BioPro, I don't know if you heard of BioPro. BioPro makes these, it's a non-synthetic natural replacement for HGH. And the more, we have a couple of team guys on here, Mark Green, Eddie Gallagher, both walked away and actually are on it now because they like the sample so much. But definitely helps in recovery. The sleep one really took me from 4 hours of sleep to 9 hours of sleep.
Bro,
so it's pretty incredible. And the guys at BioPro are absolutely awesome. So that's some BioPro for you. Mighty Oak swag bag has my new book, which you endorsed.
I did.
So thank you for that. Mission Without Borders.
Yep.
And Gators Eyewear. We're gonna get you let you pick your pair, but right now we have these, but some Gators eyewear.
We needed a child set for my tiny head. I need like the Oshkosh bagosh of glasses. So
Gators is awesome, man. And,
they are.
You know as well as anybody about protecting your eyes, and the ballistic eyewear is so good with Gators, and they have aluminum frames. So if you get hit, like I know, like Oakley's, they have good ballistics, but you get hit and the glasses fall off your face. Now you're in a gunfight. And you don't have any eye pro.
Yeah.
They have aluminum frames. What else we have? Okay. The big one is Smith & Wesson. So Smith & Wesson, I got the M&P 2.0 here. I love this gun. It's got a metal frame, and it's got this dual port, which keeps it shooting nice and flat. We've got a Vortex Defender on it. And this is the gun that I really am totally digging right now, and want to hook you up with that.
I got to tell you that putting a red dot on my gun a couple years ago changed everything for me. I really struggled to shoot because of the damage to my right eye, and shooting iron sights really was messing me up. I was a right eye dominant shooter, so when I put the red dot on, I was able to shift over to my left eye with alignment. It's made all the difference in the world. So, So thank you, Vortex, and Smith & Wesson, obviously amazing company. So, bro. Yeah, I've seen you slinging lead with this. So
yeah, it's an awesome gun.
But,
so
thank you.
Box it up, and I
look forward to throwing a little lead down range.
We do, man. We got 2 miles from here. Got a new place with Saddle River Range here locally. Partnered with them to be able to use their range there and start taking guests.
Nice.
Guest house shooting.
Okay.
Knocking out some plates. So yeah, we'll definitely do it. But man, I know everybody loves watching the Christmas morning on the Resilient Show, but
this is amazing. Like this actually may be better than Christmas. I think about the only way it could have been better is if you gave me like a new pair of cowboy boots, top it off, and then it would have been Christmas. Just like this would have been my house at Christmas.
People want to hear the show and want to hear about you because you're just an amazing human being, not just what you did in your service, but just who you are now and what you're doing now. And I want to talk about several things. Of course, we want to talk about your time as a Navy SEAL. We want to talk about your time both Iraq and Afghanistan. One of the things that I think we both share that you and I have both spoken about that I don't hear a lot of other people speaking about, and that's successful men dealing with insecurities, being content, feeling guilty about things.
Yeah.
And those are some things that I think you and I can really speak into that I think everybody really appreciate. And so I want to dig into that. I want to dig into the balances of being an entrepreneur and being someone that's in a public light and the challenges with that. I want to talk about public speaking. I don't get to talk about that on the show very much. I do it, you do it. And so I want to get into that, and because I know a lot of people have a desire to do that and what it's like. But I want to start off with where you came from, like how you grew up, where Jason Redman start off.
Yeah, I was. I'm from the great state of Ohio. There's a lot of amazing people from Ohio and home of the Ohio State Buckeyes. So shout out. Hopefully this year we can take down Michigan. I was raised in a family that definitely very strong patriotism. And so from a very young age, just highlighting and gratitude for what I like to call the protector community, fire, military, law enforcement. Grew up with stories of both grandfathers fought World War II. So hearing stories about that, my dad's father, a very decorated B-24 pilot in the European theater, flew all his missions. I remember there was a framed newspaper article of how he had been shot down and crash landed in a snow-covered field in Yugoslavia and evaded back to Italy, got the Distinguished Flying Cross for that. My great uncle, his brother was killed in the Pacific Theater. He was a pilot over there. On my mom's side, they were French. And actually, my mom's father fought with the French military. And after the war, immigrated to Canada, where my mom was born. And then my mom became a naturalized citizen here in the U.S. She didn't even speak English till she was like 24.
Wow.
It's something I've commonly seen, no different with my mom. I'm sure you've seen this. You know, some of our naturalized citizens are some of our greatest patriots and believers in freedom. And it's sad to see in this age, there's like this attack on patriotism. Yet people who have come here from other places truly understand how great we have it. And my mom's a shining example of that, along with many other that I've met. So anyways, I grew up in that world.
Your father served as well, right?
Yeah, my dad was in the Army. He was an airborne instructor and rigger during Vietnam, although he never went to Vietnam.
Right.
He was at Fort Campbell. And that's actually how I found out about SEALs. The SEAL teams up until, I think about 2001, including myself, went through Army Airborne School. So my dad had met some SEALs in airborne school. And when I was about 14, he said, I was exploring. I was kind of like, hey, I definitely want to go in the military. You know, for a while there, I wanted to be a pilot like my grandfather. You know, when I saw Top Gun, I was like, I want to be Maverick, man. You know, I was all about it. And then G.I. Joe, I'm a G.I. Joe generation guy. So the special operations side of G.I. Joe kind of fascinated me. And as I started to explore more, looking into all the different areas of special operations, the Green Berets, the Rangers. I looked at some of the long-range recon patrol stuff guys were doing in Vietnam, which was really impressive.
Yeah.
I hadn't found much about the SEALs, though. I hadn't really stumbled on that until my dad told me about it. He said, hey, there's a group of guys in the Navy called SEALs. He said their training is considered some of the toughest in the world. He said, you're a good swimmer. He said, you should check this out. So this is mid-'80s. You know, mid to late 80s. And, you know, I know it's going to blow your mind. The internet didn't exist yet.
Yep.
And so, yeah, trying to find out stuff about them was interesting. You know, I'd find little tidbits here and there. I'd find some articles. But
there was that video on the Strand, right? That was out around that time. All it takes
be someone special.
Be someone special.
That's right.
Yeah.
It was so special. Cheesy, man. It was like 80s marketing at its best, you know. But yeah, I was blown away when I went in the Navy office, and that's what I saw. Although I got a lot of resistance, the recruiters there didn't. I'm not, you know, I'm sure you encounter this. You and I aren't the biggest guys, so we're not what most people think of when they think of a special operations guy. Even though we know the reality of that,
right.
But those in the regular military don't even sometimes know. So yeah, I got a lot of grief and was told you'll never make it, and you know, you're not what the SEAL teams are looking for and all this. And thankfully, it didn't dissuade me too much. I think it actually hardened my resolve to do it.
Yeah.
And yeah, just continued on that path.
Yeah, I remember that I had that same conversation I grew up in a pretty dysfunctional household, and my father, you know, I came from 80-something years of World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam. My father was a Marine infantryman in Vietnam, and my father was also disparaging towards, you know, wanting to be in special operations, you know, telling me I wouldn't make it. And my stepfather was like, who was very abusive, you know, physically and verbally, was like, why would you sign up to do that? Like, what are you gonna do when you don't make it? The whole thing was, what are you gonna do when you don't make it? And that just, to me, that put kind of tell me I can't mentality. Like, now I'm gonna do it. I was 100% because these guys think I can't.
Yeah.
And it actually put some resolve in me. Like, I had to. I didn't have an option not to.
I feel the same way. Thankfully, it wasn't on my family side. I wouldn't say my family was divorced. My parents divorced when I was young, so I bounced back and forth between the two of them. But for the most part, they were supportive of what I wanted to do. I think my dad told me, you're too small, too much most of my life, which created it definitely planted seeds of insecurity that I carry even to this day, which I'm like, those are things that we wrestle with as individuals. And but the good news with that is, and I try and tell people this, the difference between successful and unsuccessful is successful people ignore those little voices and continue to drive forward despite the doubts and problems we have, whereas unsuccessful people turn them into excuses to not do it. And but despite that, it was more of, the people around me, oh my God, you're going to become a SEAL, that'll never happen. And I heard it all the way through, but like you, it became a fire. It became a fire, like I will prove you wrong. And as I've gotten older, I've figured out that that's both that can be a strength and a weakness.
Yeah.
You don't always have to. Using it for a fuel on one side is good. Using it for fuel to prove others wrong sometimes isn't always the best case.
Yeah, you don't always have to answer to other people's their own insecurities that they're voicing towards you.
Yeah.
You have a brother and sister as well, and
I do.
They both join.
Yeah, my older sister, who I call my little sister, we're very close. We're Irish twins. We're only 11 months apart. She did a career in the Air Force and unfortunately came down with a condition that forced her to medically retire from the Air Force, but she had done so well. The Air Force said, hey, we want you in a GS position immediately. We're going to put you right back into what you were doing. And she's on the path to do very well on the civilian GS side. They're grooming her. She currently is at the War College right now.
Nice.
Her second go at the War College. And then my brother was a Marine. He fought in Afghanistan. So yeah, we were a family of patriots and protectors. So it's been.
We know who the standout is in the family. Your brother.
My sister and I will. We're I don't know. We're all. It's always funny. It's a competition. And I always give her grief about the Air Force, but obviously. We'll touch on it later, but I owe my life to the Air Force. I mean, it was that gunship up overhead. So she never fails to remind me of that. Anytime I might be getting a one-up on anything, she'll be like,
"Wow, I made your brother when I said the standout would be your brother.
Oh.
He's a Marine, yeah.
Of course, the Marines. There's no doubt about it.
Just ask him. I'm sure he's going to tell you.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah.
I'm sure he reminds you guys every Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah. Hey, man. He's, and the Marines were good for him. I wish... I will say this: my brother did 4 years and got out, and he had really bad leadership when he left the Marine Corps. I mean, it was just you and I had been in at that point for probably 8 years, I think, when he was getting out, and it was all the marks of bad leadership, just really bad leadership, and it drove him out of the Marine Corps. And I really wish he had not. I think my brother would have done really well with a career in the Marines. That's that shows you the impact of leadership.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because you see that with so many people that first 4 years in the Marine Corps, when they're subject to the influence of leadership, and it's nothing they have control over. It really ultimately changes the trajectory of their life.
Yes.
It can.
Yeah.
And that is really unfortunate, and leadership is so important. And so you go in the Navy, you go to Buds, can't pass up sitting across from a team guy and not hearing about your Buds experience.
Yeah, if you want to know if a guy's a SEAL, just wait. They'll tell you.
Yep.
Although I will say the Marines, I laugh. I always meet all these individuals, and very rarely do I come out of the gates and say, hey, I was a SEAL. I don't know, in the spotlight enough. Yeah. Sometimes I just like to, when I meet people who don't know who I am, I was just like, yeah, I was in the Navy.
Yeah.
And anytime I meet a Marine, immediately I get the, oh, yeah, I was the men's department of the Navy. And I was like, yeah, I worked with you guys some. So it's always fun, to play with the Marines when it comes to that.
Buds is obviously, one of the toughest trainings in the world, and everybody that goes through it has their own experiences. And, love to hear about what your perspective was like, both because you were also a Buds instructor.
Not a Buds instructor. I was an instructor at my SEAL team, so there is a difference.
Okay.
The SEAL teams have their own instructors that train the platoons. Later, that turned into our training command. There's an East Coast and a West Coast training command. But I obviously, having gone through Buds, later I went back. I've had friends that have been out there in some sort of leadership capacity. So I've got to go back over the years and watch as Buds has grown.
Yeah, it's amazing to see how these programs, in the recon side, see how it's, I'm very proud of how the program, now it's a year-long pipeline. When the guys graduate, they've been through basic reconnaissance course. They've been through their advanced training. They've been through, jump, dive, free fall, SEER, and their, shooting package, and they're ready to deploy.
Yeah.
And same, our generation, you have to work for free fall and those things. And now, they're coming out.
I didn't get free fall till I've been in 13 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're coming out. And now it's much better this way, because we need guys who, the sooner they're trained up for the capabilities that we need across the spectrum, that's more experience that you're able to utilize those guys. I know when I was a new guy, you were a new guy until you had done at least 2 platoons. So, I mean, that's a roughly, give or take almost a 4-year period at a minimum, if not a 5-year period. That's a lot of time you're losing out on experience that guy could be training as a sniper, as a breacher, as a communicator, as, free fall operations, any of these things. So I'm really glad. That is something that I feel like I'm glad they changed.
Yeah.
I do think it's better.
Yeah. So going to Buds for you, what was that experience like?
I think for some guys, Buds is a shock to their system. For me, I knew it was going to be hard. So I don't feel like there was anything that I ever felt like, oh my God, this is beyond what I expected. I mean, I expected a kick in the skull, and they delivered. Almost everybody has a weakness, and the instructors apply pressure on that weakness. And that's why a lot of guys who have never experienced that, we often see it, and I'm sure you've seen it, guys who are naturally talented, who were star athletes in school growing up, or maybe even in college, that then come to SEAL training or they come to special operations training. Oftentimes, those are some of the first guys that end up quitting. They're so genetically gifted, they were able to do very well without maximal effort.
They never faced failure.
That's right. Failure or massive adversity, or truly been exposed to, you have weaknesses.
Yeah.
And everybody's got them.
Yeah.
And Buds is, people think how physical it is, but, special operations training, and Buds in this case, is designed to be mental.
Yeah.
And they will push everybody to that breaking point. They'll figure out, oh, this is what impacts you. Now we're going to apply pressure on this until you either break and quit, or you break and pick yourself back up, and now you're forged forward and harder. Believe it or not, for me, swimming was a challenge. I was a great swimmer, but never competitively. I never swam long. I was super comfortable in the water, but I was not a fast swimmer. And I really struggled, especially as we got into second phase and third phase. I broke my arm when I was going through training. That slowed me down even more. So that was a challenge for me. I got a lot of grief on my swimming, and thankfully, big shout out, he's out now, but Jimmy Hoy, he became my swim partner and basically just yelled at me in the entire swim to swim faster and beat me along to pass those swims, later in Buds.
Yeah. Yeah. I heard you talk about in another interview, your experience with Hell Week, and just watching people quit, and how you thought, kind of surprised people were quitting at the rate they were.
Yeah, and the people who quit. I mean, once again, like, I'll never forget, Boat Crew 1 in my Buds class were the studs.
Yeah.
Boat crews go by height. Tallest dudes are Boat Crew 1, all the way down to the shortest dudes. You would have been in the Smurf crew with me.
Chafing on top of my head from the boat on top of my head.
Yeah, baby. Although I was me and one other guy were like the tallest dudes in the Smurf crew. So that always was kind of interesting. But Boat Crew 1 were beasts. They won everything through first phase. Everything, there's saying in Buds, it pays to be a winner. And when you win, you're rewarded. Like, oh, you get to sit out this next race. And the losers get extra attention in the form of extra push-ups, extra evolutions, whatever it is, you're punished. So the Smurf crew, we lost a lot in first phase. Boat Crew 1 won almost everything. We got into Hell Week, and Tuesday night was Steel Piers, and this table's a great example because it's a lot like Steel Piers. It was a large floating dock. It's midnight on Tuesday night. You've now been awake for over 48 hours. Now maybe probably coming up on, 50, 60 hours awake, grueling physical activity for that period of time. And Tuesday night really becomes the big breaking point for a lot of individuals. It was cold. I went through Hell Week in March of 1995. So the temp was probably in the 50s out there. And they put you on this large steel pier, and they make you take off all your clothes aside from your dry shorts. And you're in a maybe 5x5 steel riveted area, you and your swim buddy. And you have to do all these weird, hey, fold your clothes, put it in the northwest corner, put your hat in the southwest corner. And if anybody messes up, then the whole class gets punished. And you're punished by laying on top of the steel. They're misting you with a fire hose. Sometimes they're full pressure, knocking people off into the water. And then you're in and out of the water. The instructors will go throw your stuff into the water. So now you're having to dive down in the middle of the night into the muck to find your boot, sock, pants, whatever it is. And then they park up above the steel pier is the actual pier itself. And the vans are parked up on that pier. And the vans are heated and running. And if you quit, they escort you up into the van. They hand you a cup of coffee and a blanket, and you could just see the guys sitting in the van looking down on us warm. So it's very enticing. You're really at the breaking point, and individuals quit in droves. I mean, we lost probably half of our class, but the big shock to me was Boat Crew 1. All of Boat Crew 1 quit except for their boat crew leader who had been a Marine. And he was the one guy that didn't quit, but the entire boat crew, one shot, all quit during steel piers. And it was both a shock to me, and I wonder how many people that boat crew took with them. And that becomes a dividing line oftentimes in life, people who we look up to who suddenly say, I can't do this, or they mess up, creates a sense of doubt in some, whereas in others, it becomes like game on. Like if that guy just left, then I have the ability. It almost creates a little more conviction in you. And for me, I think it created more conviction in me. I was like, all right, well, I'm not quitting.
Yeah.
I lost a friend during Hell Week, a guy I'd gone through boot camp with, a guy I'd gone through A school with. He was like a big brother to me. And we weren't in the same boat crew. And on Tuesday, he came up to me and said, hey man, this is stupid. And I was like, you sound like you've already made your decision. And, once again, he was like, yeah, I'm not sure this is for me. And I was like, huh. And nobody wants to quit by themselves. Right. I'm sure you've seen this.
Yeah.
They always want to try and get somebody to go with them. And oftentimes it works. And man, I knew that, so I stayed away from him. And sure enough, a couple hours later during surf torture, he checked out.
It's the same in life, right? When somebody's spiraling down, they will take somebody with them, and they try to co-op people to kind of join in their pity party or
unless it's mental health.
Yeah.
And we can talk about that because we do the exact opposite of everything we've been trained to do. And that's often what I speak about. Yeah. We push everybody away.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I kind of want to do that one solo.
Yeah.
Which is why they end up, isolating and alone and leading to the, statistic that we you and I both fight against is that veteran suicide statistic because they find themselves alone.
Yeah.
Man, there's so many lessons that come from those times of training. And one of the lessons I just had Marcus Luttrell on, and one of the things he talked about, and I talked about in kind of different vernacular and different language before, is one of the things that training gives you as you bring it over into combat is, the guys that finish that training with you, when they're with you in combat, you don't have to walk into a room and look over your shoulder to know if they're going to be there. The kind of guys that hey, I went through this training, maybe the same class, maybe a different class, but the kind of guys that are on your team because of that training, you never have to look over your shoulder and know that.
Yeah, it gives you that leveling feel that no matter what, I mean, you well know there were guys in your team who you loved and you'd love to hang out with them, and there were even guys in your team you did not like.
Right.
But you knew they had your back and you had their back.
Yeah.
Because you knew that they had been tested as we went through training. BUDS is not the hardest thing you'll go through. Oftentimes the instructors would say that. And when you were a student, it was hard to wrap your head around that when they would say, hey, you're going to do harder things in training. You're going to be colder and more miserable in training. And when you're a student, you're like, whatever. This is definitely the worst it'll ever be. And man, it was not true. I mean, man, multiple times in training, I was colder, I was more miserable, I was pushed beyond what I thought I could do. And even in combat, I mean, I would not be here. That night that I got shot up, everything in me wanted to go to sleep, to just stop fighting.
Yeah.
And I definitely attribute that mindset I was taught, that you continue to push. And in this case, in some ways it was physical, but it was much more mental. That whole stay awake, stay alive. So training teaches you that, and knowing you have guys around you that have the ability to do that is, and I trust him. And that night, going back to combat, I knew my teammates were going to fight to save my life and to bring me home, dead or alive.
Before we get into Iraq, you had a deployment that you don't talk about as much to Afghanistan. What was that deployment like to Afghanistan?
So the Afghanistan deployment was it's very interesting. It's a large part of my book, the Trident. I don't talk about it mainly because a lot of people don't bring it up. People want to focus on the firefight. They want to focus on other things. But yeah, I have no issues talking about it. The reason it was interesting because I had gotten off course as a young leader, and I got myself in trouble.
Enlisted leader.
No, I was an officer at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I was on course as an enlisted leader. I had done very well. That's what led me to get recommended for a commissioning program. Went to school, ODU, 3 years at school from 2001. 9/11 hadn't happened. I started school in July of 2001. And obviously 9/11 happened only a couple months later. I tried to get out of the program, went back to my team. And our CO, who was one of the most respected leaders, probably in the SEAL teams, prophetically said, "Jay, this war will go on for decades." He said, "Go back to school, finish. I guarantee you'll get your chance." And he was right. Did very well. Ranked, top rankings as an enlisted guy. Top rankings I was ranked number 1 out of the ROTC program when I left and got commissioned. And unfortunately, I think a lot of that went to my head. Came back thinking I was going to be God's gift to leadership, and the world had changed drastically overnight. As I'm sure you saw it, we quickly realized as 9/11 happened that a lot of the tactics that we were utilizing and things that we had trained to do didn't really work the way they thought they were going to on the battlefield. Battle and combat is the great equalizer. You quickly figure out this doesn't work and we have to change or we're going to die. And a lot of the tactics and stuff we had done got rewritten. So when I came back, here I was thinking I had all this experience, but the reality was I didn't. I was now leading probably 70% of the platoon that I stepped into had combat experience, and I did, but instead of humbling myself and being like, hey, I can learn from these guys, I let my ego and arrogance get in the way.
Yeah.
And that led to some poor decisions and a bad call on a mission in Afghanistan in 2005. It wasn't a super combat filled. That deployment wasn't super combat filled. It was super impactful because the Red Wings mission happened on that deployment. Our platoons were split. So I was part of 3 Troop for SEAL Team 10, which was comprised of Echo and Foxtrot. For those, the Red Wing story or the Lone Survivor story, that's Marcus' story. My boss was Lieutenant Commander Eric Christensen. Eric was in charge of 3 Troop, and then Mike McGreevy was the OIC of Echo Platoon. I was originally in Echo Platoon when I first got commissioned. I had known Mike from SEAL Team 4. He wanted me to be his assistant officer. I kind of wish I had stayed in that platoon. They ended up moving me over into Foxtrot Platoon because they had a junior OIC and a very aggressive chief, and they thought I would be the balance. Unfortunately, I'm not sure I did a very good job of that. I butted heads pretty heavily with the chief and the OIC and did not do a good job navigating all that. But those are lessons learned. A lot of things I speak about frequently in leadership now about those lessons. But God works in mysterious ways, because if I had still been in Echo Platoon, who knows, I could have been on that helicopter when it got shot down. we were in Germany getting ready to rip into Afghanistan. We were less than a week from doing our rotation into Afghanistan. Echo Platoon was coming back from Afghanistan and was going to pick up the maritime interdiction mission in Germany that we were standing. And I remember we got word, hey, a helicopter's been shot down, and we didn't know anything. We were waiting, and then the word started to come back that we had lost all these guys, friends of ours, guys we had trained with. We lost Eric. We sent guys immediately to Afghanistan. I was still in Germany for probably another 4 or 5 days while we got all the rest of our gear together. That's when I met Marcus for the first time. They had recovered. Danny Dietz and Mike Murphy and Marcus had been recovered at this point. So myself and a couple of teammates went to Lawnstool, met one of our teammates and kind of heard some of the first stories about what had happened. Stood watch on Danny and Mike Murphy's bodies while those guys went and got some lunch for the honor flight. Met Marcus for the first time, and then went back, and a couple of days later, we rotated into Afghanistan. So my very first exposure to combat was the memorial ceremony, the ramp ceremony for the 11 guys we had lost, including friends of mine like Mike McGreevy. I think that in some ways we all wanted revenge.
Yeah.
Not even in some ways. We all wanted revenge. Let me rephrase that. It was a weird time in Afghanistan because politically, the government wanted to pull back, and the Karzai government of Afghanistan wanted to stop a lot of the special operations missions, even though we well knew they wanted to stop a lot of the hard kinetic missions, even though we knew there were bad guys.
Right.
One of the first missions we conducted, finally, that we got approved on almost a month after Red Wings happened, was a Taliban commander that was launching rockets into Bagram. And finally, we got approved. Later, we would find out the only reason we got approved is because the general in charge was out of country, and it got approved at a lower level. But we got approved to do this mission. The Taliban commander happened to be friends with Karzai. We found him. We found rocket material. We found IED making material. We wrapped all these guys up and created a massive incident because it created the whole village was up in arms that we had come in the night, that we had breached the doors, that we had come in by helicopters, all these things that they felt like they should not be happening and they should be notified of. But we wrapped up this top guy who happened to know Karzai. I guess they followed a small firefight broke out. I had already left. We had taken the detainees on helicopter out, and the ground force started taking fire, drove back to Bagram, and literally had a massive crowd that amassed outside Bagram and was trying to tear the gates down. You can go back and watch the news. This would have been July of 2005, but I remember it was like national news. We were watching from the talk what was happening outside the gate. And anyways, Karzai basically stepped in and said, hey, that's my guy. You need to let him go. And yeah, within 12 hours, all those guys were released. And I remember that was kind of my first introduction to
politics.
Yeah, why are we here? Why did we go risk our lives, for guys we know who actively want to kill us? I mean, we red-handed. We know you've been firing mortars into Bagram. We have all the evidence, and yeah, we just had to let you guys go. And man, what a precursor to, so this would have been 2005 to
yes.
17 years later when we turned it all back over to the Taliban. I mean, who would have known then? So anyways, we were put in hack, and we weren't allowed to do any missions for about a month. We were the redheaded stepchildren of special operations. The general got back and was angry that had been approved. We bided our time, and then finally our new troop commander, who was the Team XO, got approval for us through the Jasodev to go down to Kandahar and start conducting operations down in Helmand. And we started doing things on a regular basis, some clearing operations and things like that. That was when I made a bad call. On September 23rd, we conducted a big joint operation with some of our foreign counterparts, pretty large operation where we locked down this valley that had, every time American and coalition forces flew through there, they were taking fire. And the Taliban fighters were very brazen. I mean, normally, aircraft would come through and they all scurry like rats. And these guys were staying in position and firing on anything that would come through there. So they basically said, hey, let's clear this place out. So we locked down the valley. I was on a western ridge line looking down in the valley below. We pushed an assault force through the valley to sweep through. We landed in the early morning hours. Right off the bat, there was a brief skirmish firefight. I think might have had some Apaches or something that engaged the enemy. The sun rose, and then as the guys swept through the valley, a lot of activity, but no enemy contact yet. I was manning a javelin crew, sniper crew, and a machine gun crew on that western side. Later in the afternoon, probably about 4 p.m., we had a hard extract time. And we had been told, hey, if you don't make this extract, you guys are going to be left out there. We won't be able to come back and get you for several days. So I had already pushed back my snipers and the javelin crew, and I had the machine gunner with me because we were being a relay for the guys down in the valley. Our position created a better comms relay. Guys down in the valley gotten into a big firefight. They stumbled upon a whole bunch of Taliban fighters, and they had one of our Afghanistan Army guys got shot, and our guys were in this gunfight. The OIC called and said, hey, we need reinforcements. I made the decision to go down into the valley with the machine gunner to support them. It wasn't the best decision. Oftentimes, I think you well know, having multiple maneuvering elements is not a good thing. But I made the decision where a lot of people would say, well, hey, man, you made a call, you're a leader. The problem is ego stepped in, because what happened is my senior enlisted was back with the rest of the ground force and the ground force commander. And when I said I was going to do this, he told me not to do it. And ego got in the way. And I said, screw you, man. I'm doing this. I'm going down to support these guys. What I did, and as soon as I dropped off that valley, we lost comms. So what I didn't know is they were spinning up air assets to push down to provide fire support for these guys. So it took us we were high. We were a good 2,000 feet up. So to get down into that valley. So it took us at least 20 minutes to get down to the valley floor. It's a miracle we didn't encounter. There were fighting positions everywhere. There was caves everywhere. It's a miracle that we were not killed. That's the reality. It was a bad call. And by the time I got to the valley floor, we picked up radio comms again. They were breathing fire into the radio. Get your ass out of the valley. We're trying to bring in a fire mission. We don't know where you are. Scampered back up the northern side, and they sent a 60 to pick us up, and they took us back, and then they were able to release the fire mission, take out the big enemy stronghold. But we missed extract, so we ended up having to lay up for about 3 days. Went down and did BDA, and we had killed a bunch of Taliban fighters.
For those listening on a BDA, battle damage assessment, go back in and see what
damage
kind of havoc
we had done,
wreaked,
who was killed. Yeah. And interesting. I did not go down. I was in an Overwatch. I'll be honest. When I got out of that valley, the ground force commander, who was our executive officer, ripped into me. And what I should have done is just owned it and said it was a bad call. I didn't. I fought back, and I said, hey, man, I did the right thing. Guys needed help. I went down and supported them. That really became the severing point from a lot of my teammates. They were like, that guy's dangerous. He's going to get us killed. And I think me fighting back against that probably continued to make this bigger and a bigger problem. So like I said, we laid up for those couple of days. Pretty much I didn't have many guys talk to me after that. By the time we got back to Kandahar, my XO said, hey, I'm sending you back to Bagram to meet with the commanding officer. And I think at that point, the reality of, hey, I screwed up. But pride and ego was still in the way. It would take months before I finally started to grow up and own what I did. I took a victim mindset, like, hey, it's my chief who I didn't get along with. He's throwing me under the bus. And he did. I mean, at the meeting with the CO and everybody, when they had gotten back, he laid out everything that I had ever done. Some of it rightfully mistakes I had made. Some of it, petty. But regardless, you as a leader, you have to hold yourself to a higher standard. And I wasn't. And he, drinking related things, everything. It was a hard lesson, and I hit rock bottom. I mean, when I was confronted with, hey, we are thinking about taking your Trident. And in the SEAL teams, I don't know how it is for other special operations forces. We have something called a Trident review board. And basically, if you do something so egregious that discredits the SEAL teams, or it's so dangerous that we feel like, hey, we don't want you around operating anymore, they can convene a Trident review board. The leadership and senior leaders of the team come together, they listen to the evidence, and then they say, hey, we're going to take your Trident, whatever's left in your contract, you'll go finish out your career in the regular Navy, and you can either stay, or most guys end up getting out. So that's what I was facing. I think it was September 26th, maybe, or a few days after that. But yeah, and I remember going back to my room and none of the guys were talking to me, and interesting, because I can relate now so much to fire, military, law enforcement who come to the end of their career, whether willingly or unwillingly something happened. We tie ourselves so tightly to the emblems and the badges and the units that we're a part of, that when you're faced unexpectedly with losing it, it's your entire identity. And that's how it was for me.
Yeah, that's your identity is tied to something that's temporal, and it's dangerous. It's great to be proud of those jobs and proud of being a SEAL and proud of being a firefighter or recon marine, but it's so dangerous when your identity's...
Because I convinced myself in that moment that my life was over. If I didn't have that Trident, my life was over. And I, we're overseas. You have your guns with you everywhere you go. So, I was in my room in Bagram, put my pistol in my mouth, and was getting ready to blow my head off. And I was sitting like this with my gun in my mouth, getting ready to pull the trigger. And I looked across the desk, and there was a picture of my wife and kids. And I think God kind of smacked me in the back of the head as I looked at my kids, and he said, what message are you going to send your kids if you take your life in Afghanistan? And that shocked me enough to you need to go get help. So I put my gun away. I went and I met with a special force chaplain, and he talked some sense into me. And he said, hey, I don't think they're going to take your Trident. He said, but no matter what, he said, you kind of got a new beginning ahead of you. You're going to have to figure out this new path to, you've messed up. That may be even harder than if they did. And he was right. So the next day they didn't. I owe my career to my commanding officer to this day. Big shout out to him, Kemp Perro, because here is a guy who was in charge of Operation Red Wings, who lost all these guys. The biggest loss of life NSW had sustained until Extortion 17 happened 6 years later. None of us got to go home, and especially the CO didn't get to go home and mourn these guys. He had to continue to work and be focused on this deployment. So I guarantee the last thing he wanted to do was deal with this knucklehead, young ensign making bad decisions on the battlefield. And I think the easiest decision as a leader would have been, you're out of here.
Right.
And I often talk about this in leadership. Humans, we make mistakes, man. So was it truly malicious, or was it just immaturity and ignorance? And I think he saw it was immaturity and ignorance, and saw that I had the potential to be a good leader and believed in me, and went against a lot of the senior enlisted leaders who said, get rid of this guy.
Yeah.
So, but that started a whole new journey. So that was kind of my Afghanistan deployment.
When that was all the dust settled from that and you kept your Trident and that was all put to bed, did you have to change commands or you stayed in that team?
No, I stayed not in that troop. They moved me to a new troop, which was very difficult. You know, they polled the guys and they said, who do you want to serve with? Who do you not want to serve with? And I was number one on the list that they didn't want to serve with. So
now you have to rebuild yourself.
It's true. And I often talk about that, you know, in a lot of the talks that I give. How do you reestablish credibility? How do you build back reputations if you messed up? And the reality is it's never too late. I don't care how old you are. I don't care what's happening in your life. It's never too late. And I think the greatest advice I was given, we got home in October, and I'll be honest, I drank my way through the holidays. I think mourning the loss of friends and mourning the loss of my career.
Did you share this with your wife, like the depth of that, like as a confidant? And
no,
were you like shameful of what happened and didn't want to?
Yes. Yeah. Later, yes. Not during the time, which is a mistake that I made because my wife has been my rock throughout our entire marriage. But she also, we talk about this in the book, in our new relationship book. Sometimes, especially in times of failure, you know, sometimes a spouse needs space to figure things out. And I needed some space to figure things out, like figure out myself. And it wasn't until part of my remediation was to go to Ranger School. So I checked into Ranger School in February.
I just want to clarify that the teams thought it's kind of like almost punishment.
Yeah.
Because no one wants to go to Ranger School. I mean, I'm like, as recon Marine, they used to give us these slots all the time, and we were like, I'm not going to that thing. And then I know team guys, because it's just a kind of a different, totally different job,
gut
right?
check.
Yeah,
it's a gut check. I mean, it's not as hard as BUD/S, but Ranger School's hard, man. I mean, my hat's off to any guy out there who's graduated Ranger School or gal. And I did not want to be there.
Yeah.
You know, I had a bad attitude when I showed up in February. Like I said, I kind of drank my way through the holidays with a bad attitude, still not totally owning what had happened and not seeing it as an opportunity to grow and get better. Mm-hmm. Still had that victim mindset. In Ranger School, I got there, and on day 3, we had the land nav course. I had taught land nav. I failed the land nav course. There's more details to this, but we'll keep it short for now. All of this is in the book, The Trident. But I failed the land nav course. The instructors, there's a lot of good and maybe not so healthy rivalry sometimes between different special operations groups. And I think the Rangers and SEALs have pretty good rivalry going. So the instructors loved the fact that I had quit. And were giving me a lot of, or that I had failed the land nav course, and were giving me a lot of grief about it. And I think all that pent up anger and frustration and humiliation blew up. And I told those guys where they could take the course, and they were like, "Are you quitting?" And I was like, "Yes, I quit," which is the only thing I've ever quit in my life. And I was so ashamed after the fact, but I was like, how do I undo this? Like, I have now crossed the red line that is undoable.
Right.
So they told me I had to go meet the Ranger Colonel. I accepted that my career was over. But when I met with the Colonel, KK Chin, amazing guy, went on, finished his career as a Major General, just an amazing, amazing guy who I owe my career to. Once again, he recognized, hey, you're not malicious. You're young. You're immature. You made a very bad decision based on emotion and based off everything that happened. And he said, why don't you, do you want to talk to anybody in the SEAL teams? I was like, hell no, man. Like, the last thing I want to do is talk to anyone in the SEAL teams and admit what I've done. And he said, well, here, I've got a good friend. And he picked up the phone, and it was my old commanding officer who had got me commissioned, who now was in charge of all East Coast SEAL Force, the most respected leader in the SEAL teams. And there was no way I couldn't take that phone. And another amazing God moment.
Yeah.
Because what are the odds? What are the odds that that guy, and I've confirmed this, I've become friends with KK Chin, and he told me, no, it wasn't. I literally dialed him, and he answered. I mean, it wasn't like pre-planned or anything like that. But I remember telling him on that call, I said, hey, there's no way I can recover from this. Like, I've messed up too much. Like, the guys don't want to follow me. Now I've done this. Like, this is the nail in the coffin. And he gave me the foundation of every bit of leadership that I now teach and the way I try and live my life. He said, Red, he said, people will follow you if you give them a reason to. He said, you need to go crush Ranger School. And then you need to come back to the SEAL teams and give the guys a reason to follow you. He said, that's all leadership is. He said, I don't care how bad you've messed up. It's human nature that people will follow individuals who are successful and who are doing good things, just who we are as humans. I mean, I don't care how bad somebody's messed up. If they've made a 180 change in their life and they are consistently successful, humans are going to follow them because we all follow success. And he said, get back in that course, finish it, and come back and show these guys why they should follow you. So I remember I was like, roger that. So I remember hanging up the phone and looking at Colonel Chin saying, can I get back in my class? And he goes, no, absolutely not. He said, you're out of your class, can't get back, but we'll send you to Ranger School jail for the next month, and you can class up with the next class and start again. And that month was probably the best thing that ever could have happened to me. I mean, it was very humbling. For a month, I walked around Fort Benning picking up trash. So here I was, this 13-year successful SEAL,
Officer.
Officer, combat veteran. And I was, the thing in Ranger School, nobody wears rank, as it should be. So it gave me a lot of time to really, for the first time in my life, to come to grips with, hey, you're not as great as you think you are. Yeah, man, you like need to humble yourself. I started reading a lot of leadership books while I was there at night and really chose to change how I drove forward and led from that point forward. So came back to my next Ranger class, crushed it. Actually, it was my goal to graduate the Honor Man. And I was tracking for that until about 5 weeks in, I came to find out that rollbacks can't be Honor Man. It's only first time through. So that's okay. I received super high marks from all my Ranger School. One of the things I like, I know they've incorporated this into BUDS. They didn't when I went through peer evaluations. I think peer evaluations are a very powerful thing because you can have people who, in Ranger School, we called them Spotlight Rangers, who, when they were under the spotlight, because in Ranger School, you have graded positions, and then you have times where you're not in a graded position. So you can slack off when you're not in a graded position. And oftentimes guys would do it, and they would be called Spotlight Rangers. But they would get peered, and they would say, hey, this guy's a piece of shit. He only steps up when it's time to lead. He does nothing. So those peer evals meant a lot to me as a guy who had screwed up, to have these guys who didn't know me from Adam, that I was under the spotlight, hey, I was the only SEAL in the entire Ranger course, for them to say, hey, this guy's done a great job.
Yeah.
And came back to the SEAL teams and it started all new because no one cared that I had graduated Ranger School. There wasn't anyone there that was like, Red, you're a Ranger now, bro. We're so glad. They weren't
very impressed.
If anything, they were like, oh, great, Ranger Red's here.
Yeah.
Actually, what they called me was Rambo Red. That's what I heard a lot more. That was the nickname I had gotten from Afghanistan. But I applied the principle, lead yourself, lead others, lead always, with the fundamental number one thing to focus on is leading yourself. How do you show up prepared, mentally, physically, you've educated yourself on all the different pieces of what you're going to be doing. And I think as leaders, we often, I think the first go around, I was so much more focused on leading others. Mm-hmm. Like we've seen it. We've seen these leaders that come in and immediately they need to hey, I'm the leader, so I must lead. I must, and they're starting to implement things that they really have not developed camaraderie and rapport and an understanding of the unit or the company or any of these things. And lead yourself first. 75% of leadership is that. And that's what I focused on. And slowly over the next year or so, I started, guys would start to come up to me and say, hey man, good job on that evolution. Well done.
As something about humbling yourself, a previous episode, I interviewed Terry Crews, America's Got Talent host. He talks about a time in his life where he was coming out of the NFL and he was, up and comer in NFL, and then he lost everything. and he had to humble himself and take a job sweeping, picking up broom and sweeping after coming out of the NFL. And that was a pivotal moment in his life, which ultimately, now Terry Crews is, Hollywood star and host of America's Got Talent. He does amazing things in the philanthropy side of his life, and just an incredible human being. But he talks about that being at the top, going back down to rock bottom. I think of you, Navy SEAL officer, combat veteran, and now you're at Ranger School and Ranger Jail picking up trash, and that's where you kind of rebuild. I have a friend that would always say, turns out rock bottom is a pretty good place to rebuild from, and it is consistently over and over.
And you know what I hear all the time now, everywhere I go. Oftentimes, I even have people who say, "Oh, you're too humble. You need to have more swagger. You need to do more of this." And I'm like, you know what, man? I'm not interested in that. I'm just going to be me, and I'm going to focus on me. That lead yourself aspect. But the other thing that it teaches you is, I've had a lot of success in my life, and I recognize it could be gone in a second, and I'm okay with that. If God decides, hey, I'm going to take all this away. I still have my family. I still have this life, no matter what rock bottom you have the ability to climb out. It's not too late. That's been a big motto of mine. So I'm thankful for what I have, but I think that's what it teaches you. If you've hit rock bottom, you now know where it is, and you have the ability to go back. And I think, that's part of an overcome mindset that I teach on. Like, hey, everything in your life could go away in a second. And if you honestly think that could never happen, or you're living your life in that manner, you're setting yourself up for failure and challenges.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey guys, 10 years ago, I had found myself in a position to where investing in Mighty Oaks and all the different things I'm involved in, I had found myself not prepared for retirement. And I went to my friend Ryan Wheelis at Allied Wealth. He had been a longtime supporter of Mighty Oaks Foundation from the beginning. He's one of our first donors to Mighty Oaks, has been a friend for a long time, and I really trusted him. And he has helped me build my retirement and invest in my future through his company, Allied Wealth. He's one of the smartest guys I know when it comes to wealth management, and has taken money that I had stuck away in 401ks that was not really producing and made it produced tenfold. And I'm so happy with the results for me that I asked him to partner with this show, and he is a partner of this show now. And we want to not only let you guys know about Allied Wealth, but we're going to be doing some special episodes on wealth management with Ryan helping co-host them. I say co-host. I'm going to be asking him questions, and we're going to be providing you information on how to best manage your wealth. So if you're like me and you need someone to help you with your retirement, with your investments, with just your overall wealth management, go to alliedwealth.com and meet Ryan and his team to get you set up. Hey, let's shift to Iraq. Obviously, Iraq's a big part of your story, another turning point for your life.
Yeah.
And deployment there. So going into Iraq, you're coming out of rebuilding your career and as a team, as a leader in the teams, and coming out of Ranger School, kind of rebranding yourself, and now you're an officer, you're a leader, and taking a team to Iraq.
Yeah, we went into Iraq, and Iraq was at a super volatile time, the 06-07 time frame.
Yeah.
I was with SEAL Team 10, Task Unit Fallujah. It was our job to go after mid-level and high-level Al-Qaeda and insurgent leaders. And it was everything that you ever dreamed of as a SEAL. Direct action, capture, kill missions, almost every night, if not every other night. I mean, we conducted 80 direct action missions over that deployment. And kinetic, helicopter raids, vehicle raids, tons of breaching, a decent amount of firefights. So on that side, I think as a soft warrior, or any warrior for that matter, you want to test yourself. And I think that deployment definitely, not that we didn't see things in Afghanistan, but I had been on the periphery of gunfights, not directly in them, like the Iraq deployment. And for me, the other thing was, hey, I messed up in combat. Like, I now need to redeem myself in combat. For guys to believe in me and to truly, it was the last check in the box for me to get my career back on track. So did that. I was with an amazing troop. That troop was probably one of the best, most talented troops I've ever served with in my entire career. Just an amazing group of amazing individuals. I mean, DJ Shipley was one of those guys. There's just tremendous, and very fortunate to have worked with them and to be able to do the things we did. A lot of incredible missions. You know, a lot of close calls. We had a ton of close calls on that deployment. June 21st, we got into well, I'll back up. The very first mission of the deployment, I actually hadn't gotten country yet, but it was a turnover op between us and SEAL Team 4. And the guy that we went after, you know, months later in September when I was wounded was the number one. He was the Al-Qaeda leader for the Anbar province. Guy, very dangerous guy, ran sniper cells, ID cells. They had shot down a Marine Corps helicopter in the fall of 2006. So he was very high on our list to get. So in April, the very first mission we conducted, this joint operation, they were going after him in Karma, where I would later be shot and where we conducted a lot of missions. And we had Petty Officer Clark Swedler was killed. So he was SEAL Team 4 SEAL. One of the Iraqi police force was killed, or Iraqi Army scouts, actually. And one of our guys, our SEAL Team 10 guy, was shot in the arm. And then the chief of that platoon, Mike Day, was shot and fragged 27 times in this super intense engagement. And
It's a crazy story.
yeah, I mean, you've heard Mike's story. Perfectly Wounded is the book. Unfortunately, Mike is a victim of the 22 we've lost. Mike struggled tremendously with the demons of war when he came home, and he took his life about a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
But the story is incredible. Mike, after being shot, blown up, he woke up, and there were 3 terrorists still in the room. The 4th one had left, and the sniper smoked him. But Mike rolled over to engage, and his rifle had been shot. So his rifle didn't work.
He had been shot 27 times.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
he got shot several more times when he woke up and decided to engage these guys. So he went to his rifle, he pulled out his SIG, his pistol, and engaged the first terrorist. And the other 2 then realized that he was still alive, and they started shooting at him. One of the rounds struck him in the bottom of the hand and blew apart the mag well, and the magazine fell. All the bullets fell out. So he's being shot at in the dark and still managed to do a mag change and kill both these guys. Went to Kia's radio, and his radio had been shot. Climbed over. He found Clark Swedler, and got on Clark's radio and said, "Hey, come get me. They're all dead." And that's when the guys realized, they thought everybody was dead. They had pulled back to regroup, and then they were going to re-enter the house. So an amazing story. If you watch the movie Act of Valor, there's a scene in there. They kind of took 2 different stories. They took the Mike Monsoor story and the Mike Day story and blended them together. But at the end, that's really Mike's story that they're showing in there. So that was the very first mission of our deployment.
I mean, it's amazing. He survives that, gets back, recovers, runs a marathon, writes a book.
Does all these things. I mean, was helping guys. He was working with the SOCOM Care Coalition. He was awarded the Navy Cross, rightfully so. And we couldn't save him.
Loses the battle to himself. That's just an emphasis on how important this fight that we're engaged in is.
Yeah. And he did what so many guys, and I think we need to come full circle back to this. He pushed everybody away. All of us were trying to help him, and he isolated himself and just refused to, just refused to. There's
a quote, I'll mess it up, but Saddam Hussein said it. He said that the mongrels, that are at our walls will die at their own hands. Basically meant that they would make combat against us so hard that we would kill ourselves. And, and for every veteran out there, if for anything else, make him eat his words, to survive. They didn't kill us there.
Yeah.
Why come home and die of our own hands like he quoted?
Yeah, exactly. Why? I don't understand it. I mean, you and I both, I frequently speak on mental health and suicide prevention.
Well, we both struggled ourselves.
I did. But I've also seen, as you have, I've lost 2 very close friends, including my best friend, to suicide, and the impact it has on the family. I try to explain this to guys in my talks. It is no different than a suicide bomber. You might as well strap a suicide vest littered with frag and stand right in the middle of your family and crack yourself off, because that is the level of devastation you do to the family. I've watched it again and again. So that's a whole nother war we're fighting. But yeah, go back. That was the very first mission. And from there, it was just conducting operations within Fallujah and then around Fallujah in the Anbar province. Just a lot of amazing missions, a lot of close calls. Got into a very big gunfight, June 21st, a multi-building compound that we took down, and had some guys wounded. Specifically, our interpreter was wounded the worst. He was fragged by a grenade that blew up next to him. We managed to, and we had 11 women and children on this target that we had to manage on top of. We had a barricaded machine gunner and shooters on the roof dropping grenades down on us, and then shooters from another building behind us. Maneuvered guys around, did a pretty good job engaging. And then we pulled back to another house about 60 yards away with the women and children, had everybody, basically grab a woman and a child all the way down to like an infant, and managed to shoot and move back to this other house, where we then called in a gunship mission that took out the fighters on the roof, secondary explosions. So I don't know if it was more grenades or if it was suicide vests, but fast forward so that was June. So only a couple months later, we were only a couple hundred yards from there when we got word that leader was going to be in a specific location, launched on that mission. And I want to back up for a second, because I think it's important. I had gotten my career back on track.
Yeah.
Big shout out to my teammates for allowing me. Big shout out to my boss, who I can't say his name. He's still active duty. But he really mentored me very well and believed in me and gave me the opportunities to grow up as a leader, and gave me challenging assignments, both in training and in combat, to help me grow. And I'll never forget, probably several, we were preparing for the end of deployment. Like when September 13th happened, we were 1 week from sending our first wave of guys home. The deployment was ending the very beginning of October. And I had, I was up for orders. So I had requested and been approved to screen for our next tier command, which is a big deal. You have to be given the thumbs up from teammates and from the commanding officer. So this was big validation for me. Hey, you did it. You came full circle. And then in addition, the other reinforcement, I was supposed to run the next mission as the ground force commander. So this is the individual that's overall in charge of all operations on the ground for a mission. You're in charge of everything that's happening. So we were looking at different missions to do that. And when this mission popped, this time-sensitive target, my boss came up to me and he said, "Hey, Red," he said, "I know you're supposed to run as a GFC, but," he said, "this is going to be a very hairy mission." And we knew it. I mean, everything, super experienced security detail. We were told all of them wore suicide vests. We expected very heavy resistance. So he said, "I'm going to have you run as the assault force commander for the target takedown. I'm going to run as GFC." And I was like, "Hey, roger that. I understand." Launched on that mission, and make a long story short, initial target we took down, no one was there, saw evidence, started noticing a bunch of activity on another building about 150 yards away. We flexed to that target and walked into a very well-executed ambush. Our leader had been in that building earlier and then had moved to the other building.
The leader you guys were after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. He had moved to that other house about 150 yards away. That was his bed down location for the night. So we had hit the meeting location, but we had missed him by, a couple of hours probably. Not knowing he was there, but then the snipers saw the activity. They watched about 5 guys come out of the door, run across the street into pretty heavy vegetation across from the house. We saw this, and my boss came up and said, "Hey, let's go find out who these guys are." We had seen it before. People hide. Usually good people don't hide, bad people hide.
Yeah.
So we said, "Hey, let's go wrap these guys up. Let's find out who they are. Let's find out, what we know." So took my team, we maneuvered up through the bushes. DJ Shipley was with me. A lot of people have seen some of those interviews. We basically walked into a very well executed ambush. We estimate 12 to 15 guys, 2 PKM machine guns. Luke, our medic, was initially hit. He actually initiated the ambush because he stepped on an enemy fighter. He was the last guy out of the vegetation, stepped on a fighter. He engaged that fighter, which lit off the ambush. Luke was shot initially below the knee. Matty ran forward to grab Luke, and he was stitched up the right side. I was out front with our interpreter, starting to lay down fire and yelling. I'll be honest, I actually was yelling cease fire initially because we had gotten separated in the vegetation. We had 3 guys off to our right that we were coming back to link up, and the angle of us and the enemy and where those guys are was directly in line.
Blue and blue.
Yeah, so I was super worried that we were shooting each other at first. I quickly realized there's no way we could cease fire. So then I started yelling, be aware, know what you're shooting at, which was really difficult because you could only see muzzle flashes in the vegetation. It's about 4 a.m., 3 a.m. at this point. Thankfully, our EOD guy was with these 2 new guys that had gotten separated, and he was super experienced. It was like his 3rd or 4th combat deployment, and he recognized we're out of this fight. Like, he pulled them back into a ditch and basically hunkered down while we engaged. I don't know if it was because I was yelling. I don't know if it's because I was out front, but both machine guns turned on me at that point. Caught across the body armor. I was shot in the arm. I was taking rounds off my helmet, off my gun. I continued to shoot. When I got shot in the arm, I think I took a knee at that point. I probably should have totally got down, but I thought my arm had been shot off. That was kind of my first thought.
This is a PKM, right? So
yeah, it's PKM.
Those listening, this is a heavy machine gun.
Yeah.
Big round.
Big bullets.
Yeah.
And when the round hit me, and what I didn't know at the time, I actually took 2 rounds in the elbow. I took a round in the lower bicep, and I took a round on the inside of my forearm, which just totally destroyed my elbow. And it kind of felt like a lightning bolt had struck me in the arm. Imagine, I always tell people, you hit your funny bone, and it's like that times 1,000. And when I reached over, I couldn't feel my arm. I guess it maybe hung on my gear or something. My radio was over here, so I don't know if it hung on that, but I couldn't feel it. So my initial thought was, holy shit, I just got my arm shot off. I think I shot a couple more times. I took a knee, and then I looked back to where the guys were. The guys had fallen back to like a large tractor tire. There was one tree that DJ was behind, and then they were engaging, and they said I stood up to move back, and that's when I caught a round in the face. So it caught me right in front of the ear, traveled through my face, took off my nose, right cheekbone, broke all the bones above the eye, vaporized my orbital floor, broke the head of my jaw, shattered my jaw to my chin, and it knocked me out. So the guys saw me fall and thought I was dead. Gunfight lasted, I don't know, we estimate 30 to 40 minutes. I came to maybe 5 to 10 minutes in, I guess. I don't know. I don't know that time frame. But it was at that point, and I don't know if I came across the radio or if I called out, but either way, it was at that point my team leader, Jay, realized that I was still alive. So they continued to fight, and I was totally pinned down. I was laying on my back, and literally this firefight was occurring directly above me. And I knew
you could see like tracers
on
your face. And
yeah, man, like 8 inches above me. So kind of my first thought when I started to come to, like, hey, you're still in this gunfight, was don't sit up. Important safety tip.
Yeah, let's stay down.
Yeah. And my first thoughts were like tactical, like, oh, what do we do in this situation? What can we bring to bear? I was thinking about the air assets we had and the drone and all these different things. And
were you in pain? Did you know how injured you were?
No, I was in pain when I first got shot in the arm. When I came to, I was not in pain. I was super messed up. Like, it was hard to think, and, it was kind of like thinking through concrete or or cobwebs.
Did you know you were shot in the head?
Not yet. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't quite figure it out. At some point, I remember reaching up to my face, and I felt this hole in my face. And at that point, I realized, holy shit, I've been shot in the face.
Yeah.
And it was at that point I kind of realized, dude, you're out of this fight. Like, there's nothing you can do. You're pinned down. You've just got to trust your teammates to win the fight.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we know that. I tried to get my tourniquet on. I knew that I thought my arm had been shot off. So I was like, you got to get a tourniquet on. This is an interesting thing for anybody that's law enforcement or tactical. Practice getting your tourniquet on in really weird, uncomfortable, and strange positions. And also recognize that if you get shot and you lose a lot of blood, you're going to be really weak. And this was what had happened to me. I used 3 of those large packing rubber bands for parachutes.
Right.
I couldn't break the rubber bands. I could not. I was so weak, I couldn't break them. So I never got my tourniquet on. Only later into the gunfight, when my team leader came forward and pulled me back, he got a tourniquet on my arm. So I'm very lucky that I didn't bleed out from that injury. I just focused on that. And I remember my thoughts were about, after, I recognized that I was out of the fight, then I started thinking about like you're going to die here. I was losing a lot of blood. So I was like, man, you're going to bleed out. And I started thinking about my wife and kids and like, hey, I also thought about, I didn't want the enemy to have the satisfaction of killing me. I knew that would be a great victory for them. So I called out to God and I said, I need your strength to go home. And I went from not having any energy, like literally it took everything in me to like, suddenly I felt like I had energy and I felt like I was able to stay awake. And I remember there was this statistic, I'd watched the show Baghdadi Yar, and I remember they had said that our trauma surgeons were so good that if you showed up with a pulse, you had a 90% chance survival. So I was like, you're going to show up awake and alive. So I was telling myself, stay awake, stay alive, stay awake, stay alive. My team leader requested a fire mission from the gunship. They initially denied it because we were so close. I was only 50 feet from the machine gun that had me pinned down. So initially they were like, not only no, but hell no, you guys are extreme danger close. They were trying to get them to move back. But
kill radius is what, 50 meters?
60 meters for 40 Mike.
Yeah, so you're...
And same for the 25 millimeter. Yeah, we were
you're 2/3 into the kill radius.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, and sometimes that frustrates me that the gunship initially denied it, but I've met all those guys and I get it. You have to look at it from the last thing we ever want to do is kill friendly forces.
Right.
So they were trying to get us to move back or try and get my team leader to move back. And he was like, there's no way. Requested again. They said no. The third time we were probably, 30 minutes at this point, 35 minutes. And he basically said, hey, look, we're running out of ammo and people are bleeding out. Like there's not going to be anybody left if you don't bring in this fire mission. So at that point, they said, what's your JTAC designator? JTACs in the military, Joint Tactical Air Controllers. They go through a very specialized school to call in bombs and bullets from aircraft. And when they graduate, they get a very specific designator number. And they basically made him give that number over the air. So they had it on record. So if they killed us, it would now be on him and that they had done everything in their power to. Right. And I remember he called out to me, hey, Red, incoming. And I remember hearing the gun go off and, there's a delay. They fly at a decent altitude and it's night. You can't see them. But I remember hearing the gun go off, boom, 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 40 Mike. And it impacted directly in front of me. The machine gun was still firing and all of a sudden it went cold. The explosions and the dirt went up over us. And gun went cold. I could hear the gunner crying out in pain, moaning, Allah Akbar, calling out to his God. And I remember thinking to myself, like, stand by. Like, here he comes, because I knew the next mission was coming in. So they did multiple more Amazing precision. I owe my life to both my team leader and my team and that 4th SOS gunship who brought in, it was the closest fire mission ever executed in the Iraq War. So my team leader at that point ran forward, got me back to the tire, got a tourniquet on my arm. They packed my face, and we called in a few more fire missions, and then the medevac came in and took me to Baghdad and saved my life.
Yeah, that's I mean, as you're telling a story, I'm thinking of all the components of training, from down the TCCC to the guys in that gunship, like
everything. And I'll tell you, one of the big things, and there's a lot of pushback against this, it's live tissue training. And I would tell you, if you are any unit out there, if you have the opportunity to do live tissue training, you should do it. Our medic, Luke, was shot. So he wasn't able to directly work on me. He was able to give the guys some guidance. But I know for a fact that the last thing we did before we went out the door was that live tissue training. And there's no doubt that the guys knowing what to do from that training helped save my life.
Yeah, because you have one guy that's taking the 18 Delta Special Forces medical training, but everyone else has the basic level of TCCC. But like you said, you go to a whole course where everyone gets that live tissue. They're doing it in the dark, under stress. That's the life. That's the kind of training that saved your life.
Yep.
That's incredible. And then, so then you go from there, you go to Baghdad. Eventually, I'm sure you go to
Baghdad, Balad, Landstuhl, home.
Yeah, Bethesda.
Yeah, 96 hours. Pretty amazing.
It's pretty amazing.
I had first stabilization surgery in Baghdad, moved me to the ICU in Balad, another stabilization surgery there, Landstuhl, 1 or 2 surgeries, and then to Bethesda. But yeah, 96 hours. I was wounded probably 3 a.m. on Thursday morning. I got home late Sunday night.
Who notifies your wife? What time? How long before she knows anything's going on?
Pretty immediate. So kind of interesting facts that occurred. Some of this we figured out later. So funny, humorous, I guess. I mean, dark humor maybe.
Yeah.
But 8-hour time difference. It's 8 hours forward in Iraq. So at 8 o'clock at night or 7 o'clock at night, my wife was at the team for the spouses meeting that was occurring for our redeployment brief. And she was sitting in the back with some of the other wives and friends of hers. And of course, it's all about the redeployment. And one of the big things was this was a very intense deployment. We lost multiple guys. A lot of combat. And so the chaplains and the psychs were talking about, hey, keep an eye on your husbands. We have resources that are here to help. And my wife kind of blew all that off like, yeah. When does our husbands get home? Because that was kind of the last thing. Like, hey, we expect they're going to get home. First wave is going to leave. So she was kind of blowing all that off. We figured out, like, I was literally in that gunfight at the exact same time. Like, I was literally being shot up and bleeding out while she was not paying attention to the PTSD. But
the training she's going to need.
Thanks, babe.
Yeah, all the training she's going to need.
Yeah. So she obviously went home, goes to bed. Next morning, takes kids to school, comes home. It's about 11 a.m. at this point. And the initial surgery I went into, I think, was like a 10-hour surgery to save my life. So fast forward to this point, and she got home and she noticed on our home phone, U.S. government is the caller ID, and like 30 missed calls. And she had forgot her phone, and she just thought it was me. She was like, that's weird, Jay's calling me so much. But we were planning on taking a vacation right when I got home. My oldest sister was getting married, so we were coordinating some of that. So she was just like, I guess he just, was trying to get a hold of me, no big deal. So she's got the kids, and the phone rings again, and it's my CO, Bob Gussentine. And he goes, Erica, it's Gus. And the call drops. And now she's like, why is the CO calling me? So panic kind of set in. She was trying to rationalize, like, okay, if he was dead, they wouldn't be calling me. But then she started to doubt herself and was like, well, what if they showed up earlier? That's why I've missed all these calls. What if they're around the corner? So she's panicking. So 5 minutes go by. Hey, Erica, it's Gus. Call drops again. So now it's like another 10 minutes before finally they had a good connection. And he's like, hey, Jay's been shot. He started the conversation with, your husband's the luckiest guy I know. He's alive. He said, but he's been shot up. He said he's been shot in the arm and he was shot in the face. So she didn't really know my mental state at that point. I'm not even sure he did. I think that was kind of the big question everybody had. Several days later, when I was in Germany, one of my teammates came back with me. He escorted me, and the other guys, Maddie and Luke, were with me. And he was like, "Hey, do you want to call your wife?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I couldn't talk. I'm trached. I'm wired shut. You know, they got a stomach tube in me. I mean, you know, I'm a hot mess. Tubes coming out of everywhere. And so I had to write. And so he was like, okay, well, tell me what you want to say. So he dials my wife, and the first thing I wrote said, hey, I got all shot up, but my wang's okay. So, she laughed, and I think that was the first thing. She was like, okay, like his sense of humor is intact.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the first communication I'd had with her. And then she was there. They gave her all the details when I was going to arrive, and she basically packed up the house. We had fortunate enough that we had family who was able to come in. She told the kids, I'm not sure when I'll be back. She told the kids, Daddy got shot up. She didn't tell them I'd been shot in the head yet. She was trying to process that. We would later tell them that. And yeah, she was at the hospital to meet me in the ICU when I got there.
There's a pretty amazing story that people that know your story probably more know you for this than anything else, is this poster or this letter you wrote, and it really speaks to your mindset of where you were, but it speaks to who you are today. You know, I think that journey of overcome mindset probably started with that letter, and you haven't stopped sharing that message to others since. And
well, it didn't start with the letter.
Yeah.
It actually started the leadership failure in Afghanistan. That's what I try to explain to people.
Yeah.
You know, so many people are like, oh my God, your injuries must have been the worst thing you've ever been through. No. God, we don't always understand why we have to go through some of the things we're going through. And I mean, I frequently question that. I mean, some of the horrific things that happen in the world that just don't make sense. I'm like, God, why would you allow these things to happen? It's hard to figure out.
Sure.
There's a reason. I will say for me, that leadership failure set me up for success in my injuries. There's no doubt about it. I won't lie, it wasn't a launch. I mean, the first week I got home, I was kind of struggling. Like, and I'll be honest, I was a little angry. I had come back. Here I was. I'd been approved to go screen for our next tier team, redeem myself. And now I'm all shot up, and I'm faced with, hey, your career is over. Like, you know, they were talking about amputating my arm in the beginning. You know, I was facing like, am I going to be forever disfigured? You know, but it was about halfway. Like I said, it was about a week into it that I was really wrestling with all these demons. Like, man, I should have moved left. I should have moved right. Why did I do this? Why didn't I do that? And finally, like, I stopped, or maybe God was like, hey, did you do everything right? And I was like, I did everything according to how we had been trained.
Yeah.
And the thought was, well, you can't go back and change any of that. What's happened has happened. The only thing you can do is shape the future. So, you know, and that kind of became this pivotal moment for me where, okay, well, the only thing I can control is me. You know, I can't control all these external factors, but I can control my attitude, and I can control being positive and a good role model for my family. You know, all the lessons that I had learned, you know, hey, lead yourself first and foremost, you know, be positive. You know, this is a process. I said, this is now medical buds. Every evolution you're going to go through is a new surgery and a new recovery. And that's how you're going to get better, is one step at a time. So that became my mindset. So it was only a few days later that the sign happened. I had some people that came into the room, family members actually, and here they were visiting, and then I think the nurse came in and was working on me, and I was, you know, you're high on meds, so it's easy to drift off, and I think I started to drift off, and they were having a conversation by themselves, and it was all about what a shame and what a pity this war is, the impact on all these warriors and military hospitals. I don't know if you ever, yeah, it's a hard place to be during war. You see, war does horrific injuries to people, mine and all the other young men and women around me, and they were overwhelmed by that, and there was a lot of pity. And when they left, I was listening to this, and when they left and my wife came back into the room, I told her, I said, you know what? That's never going to happen again. Like, from this point forward, I refuse to feel sorry for myself. I'm going to try and set the example for other guys and just try and be as positive as I can. And I asked her to, give me my pen and paper, and I wrote out the sign, and it said, attention to all who enter here. If you're coming in this room with sadness or sorrow, don't bother. The wounds I received, I got in a job that I love, doing it for people that I love, defending the freedom of a country that I deeply love. I will make a full recovery. What is full? That's the utmost, absolute, physically. I have the ability to recover. And then I'm going to push that about 20% further through sheer mental tenacity. This room you're about to enter is a room of fun, optimism, intense, rapid regrowth. If you are not prepared for that, go elsewhere. And we signed it, the management. And it was originally on, I was writing on printer paper. So it was originally on printer paper. We put that on the door. And I think somebody else came in the room a couple of days later. They didn't see it. So I told my wife, I said, hey, go find me the brightest poster you can find. And she went downstairs to the exchange at Bethesda, and there was a 11 by 17 bright orange piece of neon paper. And we transcribed it word for word, put that back on the door. And maybe a day later, a teammate was there visiting, and he took his Trident off and tacked it into the bottom of the sign. And that is the picture that's kind of gone viral. Yeah. Picked up by the news and everything else.
President Bush took it, signed it, and now it's in the Wounded Warrior Center.
Yeah, it's at Walter Reed in the Wounded Warrior Ward. So when I was there, it was the 5th floor. Now the Wounded Ward is the 4th floor, so it hangs right in the middle. We President Bush signed it. We had it framed. We put in the Purple Heart at the top, Afghan, Iraq campaign medals. We put all the service emblems, and I thank the doctors and nurses, and I have a message to the Wounded Warriors on it. And it's amazing the amount of people, even to this day. I mean, that sign has impacted millions of people.
Yeah.
Not just Wounded Warriors, people that have been, I've had a lot of people with cancer that have said, hey, I put your sign on my door. Children with cancer, children that have been in accidents. And what I like to tell people, a lot of times when I talk, I say that sign represents the most powerful thing we have as humans. God gave us free will, choice. No one forces you to lay there and feel sorry for yourself. I mean, bad things are going to happen to good people all the time.
Yeah.
The difference is you can choose to drive forward and grow from it and be positive out of it, or you can choose to be a victim,
right,
and lay there and feel sorry for yourself. So I'm fortunate that he gave me the power and that overcome mindset to choose to drive forward. And that sign now has become such a emblem of that.
Not just the message, but who wrote it and when you wrote it. It reminds me of Viktor Frankl, in the concentration camps, writing,
It's a hell of a comparison, but thank you.
I mean, it's that moment, right? It's of all the things they could take from you, they can't take away your will.
That's right.
And it's a powerful thing. And you've demonstrated that so well and inspired so many people, including myself. And one of the things in your transition that you've talked about is the struggle that you had, that I had, that so many people have, that for some reason, especially men, don't want to talk about. And as we transition from one thing to the next, and as you transition from being a Navy SEAL and overcoming these injuries and being a wounded warrior to the incredible things you're doing today as an author and speaker, you kind of talked about your vulnerability with insecurity, with being content, and the guilt behind working so hard in this relentless pursuit for things. And I was hearing you say it. Forget where I heard you say it, but I was hearing you say it, and it brought me back to a time I was on this radio interview, and I'm sure you've had probably similar experiences before, where somehow they got my long bio, and so the radio host is reading my long bio, and the further he went, and the more accolades he read about me, the more I wanted to climb under the table and hide, because I just felt so embarrassed that he was reading my long bio. And at the end, he actually asked me this question. He said, man, that's an impressive bio. Like, how does it make you feel? And I said, actually, if I'm being honest, it makes me feel like you just described someone that's completely discontent. because all those pursuits of one thing to the next was someone who was so insecure that nothing was ever good enough. I'd accomplish one thing, and I was like, okay, what's next? I was never enough, and I was in this relentless pursuit to prove something to my father, my stepfather, whoever, and my childhood, prove something to myself. And it was just, I could never be content and I could never be satisfied. And the underlying thing for that was this insecurity that loomed inside of me that always felt like somehow, some way I'm going to be exposed. If people knew what I knew about myself inside of me, I'm going to be exposed, and it just never allowed me to be content. And I thought I was the only one that really struggled with that. And I heard you say it, and I'm like, man, this is pretty profound to hear someone else who's been through the journeys we've been through say the same thing.
Yeah, I think insecurity drives a lot of people to be successful. I mean, that's a reality. The downside is it's a hard way to live.
Yeah.
And as I'm getting older, that's something I've begun to notice. Like, God has given you and I amazing successes and others out there. I mean, there are individuals who would look at our resumes and say, holy smokes, I'd give anything to have accomplished half the things those guys have accomplished. So at what point, yeah, I to be content and to be, and not that I'm not thankful. I recognize I could lose any of it in a second. So I'm thankful for what I have, but it still drives me. And sometimes I think I'm very goal driven. I think a lot of us are. Sure. I think type A's are. But oftentimes we don't celebrate those wins or take a moment to actually think about them. It's just another check. And it's like, okay, now what's next? So yeah, I think becoming secure with who you are, we live in this comparison world. I mean, this has become such an insidious thing. No matter how much I tell myself, don't compare, you're your own guy, it's so easy. You start scrolling and be like, well, shoot, I'm not doing that. You know, man, maybe I need to go down this road. So really trying to define and figure out like, hey, this is who I am. These are the gifts that I have that God gave me. And this is what I should be doing. The balance of the things that I still want to accomplish in my life with how do I make an impact, you know, a positive impact. And I think, I guess, you know, it's part of the self-actualization process in this life. So, yeah, that's something that definitely, as I've gotten older, I wrestle with, but also finding that contentment to say, I don't care. Everybody's got an opinion.
Yeah.
Everybody's got an opinion of you. You know, some of it may be based off a one-off thing that isn't a really accurate portrayal of you. Some of it may be totally accurate. So you have to figure out, you know, this is something I talked about in the Trident, you know, truly understanding who you are. It is the version of yourself in your mind closely aligned with the version of yourself the outside world sees. If it is, man, you can be pretty content with yourself when you look in the mirror and say, this is who I am. Not everybody likes it. You know, that's just part of life, but so.
Well, this show is, you know, the resilient show, and we, you know, in resiliency in the military, and we talk about these 4 pillars of resiliency, you know, mind, body, spirit, and social. Being mentally tough, physically being as healthy as you can, socially surrounding yourself with the right people, and having a strong spiritual foundation. You know, you and I are both, you know, believers, we're Christians, and it's really influenced us. But one of the things you talked about earlier, I think really ties to that as identity. And you and I both struggle with identity, one in your leadership failure, and then 2 in what we do now. And then this insecurity comes from identity. But I think when you talk about the spiritual pillar, for those who have an identity that's bigger than a job, that's bigger than a, you know, occupation or a task or duty, I think the identity of understanding that you were created and who God created you to be, and finding contentment in that is one of the most resilient aspects you could have of your life.
100%. But I also would, I'm gonna flip this for a second, because I would also say contentment doesn't mean settling.
Sure.
I think that's a key thing, because there's a lot of people that settle. They just accept that the life they have is the life they have.
Right.
And I don't agree with that. You know, I think the gifts you have, oftentimes people settle for some job or something, this is the life I have, when they've always wanted to move in a different direction. And as long as you get your family involved and you're like, this is where I really want to go, like, hey man, you only get one shot at this life. Yeah. I mean, if nothing else, I learned laying there bleeding out, like, I got a second chance. So I'm living that, and I try, and every opportunity that comes along, I try and weigh it. You know, I call that living greatly when I speak. Like, there are a lot of people that are alive. They're physically alive, but they're mentally dead.
Yeah.
Because they settled and just gave up on their hopes and dreams long ago, man. It's not too late.
Yeah.
Like, go after it. Like, when you face death, you will look back on your life and you'll ask yourself, why didn't I go after that? Like, some things, obviously, the ship has sailed. I mean, I'm not gonna be an NFL linebacker. You know, that ship has probably sailed.
Yeah.
But
I'd probably sailed at birth.
what? Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, there's no amount of steroids or food or
Yes, I have reasonable expectations, right? Logical, reasonable expectations, but
I mean, so many
I could
people
never
that just
imagine
settle.
settling. I mean, for me, like
It's not in our DNA.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine.
But if for those out there who say, well, I'm not a Navy SEAL or I'm not a Marine Special Operations guy, that, man, you have, once again, it comes back to choice. You have a choice. You can drive forward. You can figure out, how do you become the best version of yourself? And I guess at almost 50, that's like my goal. Every morning I read, I got to give credit to Ben Newman, Coach Ben Newman, mission, purpose. He calls it the burn. What drives you? And what is it that truly is reminds you of, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I have a bunch of those things, but one of those is to achieve the highest version of myself. Part of that is physical. Part of that is mental, social, all the different pillars. Part of that's financial. I want to hit some financial goals that I'm able to give back, do things, and I'm able to take care of my family. I'm able to leave a legacy behind for my kids and grandkids. So those are those things that keep me on point.
You do a lot of amazing things right now. I mean, writing books and speaking. You and I have both done those things, and a lot of people aspire to do that. I think there's a lot of people out there like, I want to write a book. I want to speak. Even though speaking is the most, they say it's the most terrifying thing anyone could do. I don't really relate to that. I feel super comfortable speaking, but a lot of people do. Like, even though that's a fear a lot of people have, a lot of people want to be public speakers and communicate. I guess for you, why do you do it, and what is your agenda? What is your goal in writing these books and public speaking? I guess because a lot of people look at authors and public speakers and think they're doing it for themselves, but for me personally, I could say that's the opposite. I could care less about the attention from public speaking or the accolades of a book. I have a real desire to make an impact through the message and reach as many people as possible. So for you, what is that drives you?
It's the same as you. It's an impact, and it's happened with every book that I've written, and it happens almost every time I speak. And every time I go on stage, I pray. I say, hey, God, allow me to impact one person. And I can't tell you how often someone will either come up to me or they'll write me later on social media and they'll say, I can't tell you how much I needed that. Like, you changed my life. Like, I was stuck on the X in my life because of this, or I lost a child and I have been mourning for years, and you finally showed me that I can continue to live. And I think those are the things. How do you help someone to become better in their life? And I think, whether it's the Trident and my leadership failure, whether it's the Overcome book and the, overcoming the challenges and adversity we all have in life, which is the message I deliver from stage, or it's going to be this new relationship book. Man, can this book help the protector community that has the highest divorce rate across the probably our country? Could we save some marriages?
Yeah.
Because we give them tools to communicate better and to have shared values and mission better and how to fight better. I mean, we talk about rules of engagement. Like, man, like, we had rules of engagement in battle. How come couples don't have Eric and I have rules of engagement. Like, we laid out, this is how we fight. Like, you're not allowed to do this, this, and this. Did you ever shoot one of your teammates? Like, did you ever get angry when you're doing a clearance and you shot your teammate?
No, but I do it at home with my wife every time we get in an argument.
So many of us do.
Yeah.
So many of us will shoot our most important teammate, and I'm like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
Like you got to have rules of engagement for how you fight, because that's the person that God gave you that said, hey, they're your ride or die, bro.
Yeah. Yeah. The art of speaking, you're presenting to people even if you're not trying, even if you're being transparent and even being vulnerable, you're presenting this image of something, because you got a limited amount of time when you speak. So you're not gonna, you could be vulnerable about some things, but you portray a certain way of yourself, and sometimes it challenges authenticity of who you really are. Has that been a struggle for you as a speaker?
No, I'm pretty vulnerable, and I throw everything out there. I mean, you know, I've had people say, oh, you need more swagger, you need more this, you need more that. I've had people tell me, you need to create this different persona. And I'm like, you know what, man, that's not it. I'm a guy who failed, and thankfully picked myself back up. I'm a guy who's hit rock bottom. I'm a guy who put a gun in my mouth at one point. I'm a guy who has doubts. I'm not afraid. I don't have it all figured out. Mm-hmm. I have a toolbox of things that have helped me, and maybe they'll help you. And that's how I deliver it. What I try to do is I've watched some speakers who their style is very direct and almost dictatorial, like, hey, do things my way because that's what's going to work for you. And the reason your life is a failure is because you're not doing things the way I do them. I've watched other speakers that deliver this, and that usually turns the audience off the majority of the time. What I've come to find is I say, hey, these things work for me. They may work for you. Mm-hmm. And here's a story. I call it a story with a purpose. Yeah. Jesus spoke in parables to really good speakers. Hey, here's a point. Let me give you a story on how this worked for me or how it worked for somebody else I know. And that's been very successful, that style of speaking that I do.
Yeah, similar here. One, it's the impact is what drives me most. And it's funny you mentioned speaking to one person, because when I first started speaking, I was being mentored by this guy named Dave Reaver.
Oh, I know Dave.
You know Dave, yeah. So amazing human being, and I didn't feel that insecurity. I didn't feel qualified. I didn't feel worthy to get up and go speak. In fact, I said I didn't want to ever speak. And Dave gets a lot of requests for Veterans Day, and he had got a request to go for multiple churches, and he threw my name in. And it's a huge church in Michigan. And he's like, hey, we go speak at this little church, tell you a story. Ended up being a church of 20,000 people. That's the first place I ever spoke. And I share my story. And before I went, he told me this. He said, when you speak, forget about how many people are there. Speak to that one person who's probably hiding in the back, that if they're not impacted by what you say today, they might go home and end it all. And just always speak to that one person. I've always remembered that. I've always even if one person hears it, and all the messages we've heard since, but at that one first event, I remember being at people coming to talk to me, and I'm wondering why people come and talk to me, and this guy who's in there, he's telling me that his family that he had been separated from is on the other side of the church, and he's going to take him out to lunch because of what I just said. And this woman who lost her kid to a drunk driver was just grieving, and she was inspired by what I said, and that gave me the motivation to keep doing it since. And so that really pushed me to kind of develop my craft of how I speak. And I feel like I've picked up the same methodology as you. This guy, I don't like this guy, by the way, now, and I'll even openly say I don't like him. His name's Andy Stanley. He's not on a personal level. I just, from a faith perspective, his theology has just taken, really, I feel, really went off course. But he's a brilliant communicator. He had this motto called "Me, You, God, You, We." And that's the method I use. And so instead of going and being a dictatorial person saying, hey, this is a problem you have in your life, it's me going up and saying, here's a problem I have. Anybody else have that problem? And now you're connecting with the audience. We both share this issue. Here's what God has to say about it. And what would your life look like, what would your life look like if you apply God's word into your life? And what would the world look like? What would we all look like if we could all, handle these situations that way? And I just feel like that's been an approach that people connect with. I love using story. We unfortunately have way too many of them, just like you. And
that's not an unfortunate thing. That's a great thing. I tell anybody who wants to be a speaker, everybody's got a story.
Yeah.
Some obviously are, more dramatic than others. But man, there's 8 billion people on this planet?
Yeah.
Story. Your story could help someone out there. And I think this, as insidious as this is, it also has the ability to put out good, positive things. And your story may help someone. And I tell new speakers, every story you think of what does it relate to? Is it a story of humility? Is it a story of leadership? Is it a story of courage? Is it a story of faith? Is it a story of relationship or whatever it is? Write them down, catalog them, because now that starts to be no different in combat. We have different weapons and
Toolbox.
Yeah, man, and that's that becomes your inventory.
Yeah, I've had my own battle with suicide. I spent the last 14 years in Mighty Oaks. I've spoken to half million people now on basis and on the subject of suicide, and we have our recovery camps, and I know it's a big part of your heart too. And the numbers are skewed, right? The VA says 17 a day. The kind of common number is 22 a day. There's reports out there that say 44 a day. The VA report, by the way, doesn't count jumps, car crashes, and overdoses, which account for a lot of suicide. But regardless what the number is, one is too many, and I think you and I both agree with that. So we know that right now, while we're sitting here doing this interview, there's someone out there from our community that's facing that decision right this moment to take their own life. And what would you say to that person?
I would say several things. Number one, depression and becoming suicidal usually is not an instantaneous thing. Usually we start buying into lies that are not true. And the lies are, something's happened, I can't fix this, or I can't get back something that was lost. Maybe it's your health, maybe it's a relationship, maybe it's a profession. So those are some of the lies we start to tell ourselves. It's too late. It's a lie that we buy into.
It's always going to be this way.
Yeah, that it'll never get better. And then the biggest lie that we buy into is the world will be better off without me. My family will be better off without me. And that's the biggest lie of all. I'm going to come back full circle to that. The other lie, for whatever reason, we tell ourselves is we want to figure it out on our own. Like protectors, fire, military, law enforcement, we're the worst because we've spent our entire careers helping people, an entire career where we depended on others to accomplish the jobs we did. Police, always going to call backup when something happens. No fire. No one enters a building by themselves. They have a team. The military, we always at a minimum had, SEAL training. I always had a swim buddy. Ranger school had a ranger buddy. The smallest, when we do room entries, always 2-man. We don't do 1-man room entries. So I ask guys like, hey man, you came from this community. Why are you doing 1-man room entries? Why are you doing all this on your own? But it's natural. That is, for whatever reason, we buy into that. So coming back to that lie that the world will be better off without me, it is not true. I've seen it. When you take your life, you might as well put on a suicide vest and sit in the middle of everybody you know who cares about you and then crack that thing off, because you're going to kill or damage them and you're going to leave them behind with all that damage. I've watched it happen over and over again. So you owe it to yourself to figure out what works. I meet so many guys or gals who are struggling, and I say, well, hey, what have you tried? And they say, well, I tried this one thing. Okay, so when we breach doors, do we go, failed breach? And everybody goes, damn it, that's it. Yeah. Everybody, let's go. Failed breach, we're done on this target. Let's walk away. Like, hell no, man. We do bring up the next tools. We navigate that problem. I mean, in breacher school, I know those guys sometimes work multiple hour-long problems, if not longer, when they're dealing with very complicated structures that they have to get into. Like, you need to approach your mental health the same way. There's all kinds of different modalities out there. And what works for me and what works for you may not work for somebody else. So you owe it to yourself that if one thing doesn't work, you need to go find others. There's dozens of different modalities, from hyperbaric counseling, EMDR.
Faith.
There's so much out there now that all you need to do is a little bit of research or reach out to others and say, hey, I'm really struggling. I haven't been able to find something. Alcohol and the self-medicating is not the answer. And so many guys and gals go back to that. So stop doing 1-man room clearances. Stop quitting at one failed breach. And you owe it to yourself, to not become that suicide bomber that leaves this massive negative impact on the people who love you and support you.
Yeah. One of the things you said, about cracking off that suicide vest in front of your family. I heard a statistic that says one in three children from a parent that commit suicide will do it as well.
Yeah.
And the legacy you leave behind. And I share their story quite a bit when I speak, as I was speaking in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, and gave the invitation for people to come to Mighty Oaks. And this Marine couple, Pete, and the wife was Heather. Heather said, "You need to go." And he said, "No, it's for somebody else. I don't want to take a slide." All the excuses you would give. And about 6 months later, I got a call from Pastor Ron Woods, the pastor at church, and he told me what Pete had done and how he stood in the back of a pickup truck surrounded by police, and he had a pistol to his head. And he said, "Tell my wife I love her, and I'm doing this for her." Right? The same, the world's going to be better off without me. People will be better off without me. And he pulled that trigger and took his life. And Pastor Ron asked, Kathy and I to go out and speak with Heather. She wanted to speak to us and tell us the other side of that story. And she talked about how she demanded to go to the morgue, even though he had shot himself in the head. They didn't want her to, but she had the right to. And she went. She had to see for herself. She had to put her head on this, while he laid on that metal table, put her head on it to hear there wasn't no heartbeat. And how she called his mom, and how his mom would never be the same. And how she needed him in the middle of the night to grieve from losing him, but he wasn't there, which is the crazy irony of that. But she said something that really impacted me and kind of doubles down on what you said. She said, Pete thought he was, by killing himself, he was taking away the pain, but all he did was transfer that pain to everyone that loves him.
Yeah.
And it was, it was that suicide vest right in the middle of the family.
Yeah, it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem, and you now have given everybody else around you a permanent impact.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so much help out there. And for those listening right now, I know Jason has many organizations connected to. This show is connected to Mighty Oaks, mightyoaksprograms.org. We've had thousands of people come through, thousands of successes. If we're not the right fit for you, we can find the right fit for you. Get help. Don't do it alone. Don't run that house by yourself.
Yep.
So, all these amazing nuggets you gave today. What do you have coming out right now that you're working on that people could kind of partner on and latch onto?
One of the downsides of speaking is you are the product.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. I don't know if there's too many more Tony Robbins style speakers out there. I think Tony Robbins and some of that generation of speakers came at exactly the right time, the beginning of the technological innovation. Now you're inundated with information. We're in the age of information warfare. So it's difficult to stand out and create a platform like what he's done as a speaker, in my opinion. I think there's a cap. You can only scale so much. So I used to think that was my goal. I've now kind of shifted that. Speaking for me is A, I want to help people, but B, it's a vehicle to other endeavors now. Yeah. So I've really started moving down the entrepreneurial journey, real estate. So my wife and I have gotten involved in short-term rentals. We just bought our first commercial property. We're launching a business there. So I'm looking at what are the other things. I follow 3 formats. I'm actually going to be giving a talk in a couple of weeks at Bedros Koulian Live about this, my entrepreneurial strategy. Diversify your income streams. Look for businesses that you can gain equity and exit from, because there is no exit from speaking.
No.
You're trading time for money. I average 100 events a year. It's a minimum 2 days, if not 3 days, for every event I do. You do the math. It lets you know how often I'm on the road. And then the last one is increasing your income. Any business you do has to bring in some level of income. There are a lot of people that do businesses that they almost approach it like a hobby. But the problem is it can be that way. You can run a nonprofit. You've obviously done that. But at the end of the day, this world takes money to pay for things, and we need some of that. So I tell people, be very careful about running a business in the negative for too long, or doing something that you're not content with the level of income that's coming in. I mean, right now, our new commercial business, there's no money coming in for that, but we knew that. We planned that, it's going to be a couple of years. So for me, those are the things I'm looking at. So I got involved with a new beverage company. It's a whiskey seltzer company called Patriot Seltzer. And I liked it because it met diversify your income stream. It can potentially gain equity. And someday there may be an exit strategy from it. But I liked it even more because of the messaging behind it. There's a lot of companies out there, they're turning their product into political messaging. And I'm so over that, man. Politics are bad enough as they are by themselves. I don't need companies to get involved, man. Make a great product and stand behind your product. That's all I'm looking for. But so many companies now have decided, oh, well, we have to be political. Patriot Seltzer came out and said, we're tired of that. There's this attack on patriotism. There's attack on law enforcement, even on the military. And they said, we want to celebrate these individuals. We want to bring back patriotism as this amazing thing. The idea our founding fathers had and what's really made America into the country that it is, built on freedom and opportunity and sacrifice of so many individuals who were willing to make this country into what it was, the protector community. So the idea behind Patriot Seltzer, yeah, it's not right or left. It's all about those who believe in this country and what made America great. It tastes amazing. That was my first check.
Yeah, it's got to taste good.
Yeah, it tastes great. But beyond that, they also had the idea they wanted to put a proud patriot on every can. And they said, Jay, we want you to be the first proud patriot. And I was like, are you sure? And they said, yeah, we want to tell your story because we want to highlight that and show that sacrifice. And I said, okay, well, I don't want to be on there forever. And they wanted to put more on there. So that is our goal. Right now I'm on the can, but we have 4 flavors: whiskey cola, cherry cola, green apple, peach tea, lemonade. Each can will have fire, military, law enforcement, EMT, medical, and we will highlight one of these amazing individuals that has one of these stories, and then 5% of our profits will go back to a nonprofit in that genre. So we just donated our first, we haven't even made a dime, but we raised money for the family of the firefighter who was killed in the Trump assassination attempt, Competour.
Yeah.
So we raised money. We just donated $1,200 to the family for that in honor of Patriot Seltzer. So we go live with that in October in New Jersey. We also have a crowdfunding campaign. We welcome anybody out there. If you want to be part of this company, you can go on our website and you can invest and you can become a part owner in Patriot Seltzer. We got some cool perks. All the way from, $250, you get, a small slice of equity in the future, and you get a Patriot Seltzer coin. All the way, if you want to come in at the big $10,000 level, at some point you will come out and do some shooting with me. I'll skydive you. We'll do some shooting, and we'll all get to sit around and tell stories and drink a little Patriot Seltzer at the end of the day. But so that's one endeavor. The next one is my wife and I's new book that's coming out. So many people who have read the Trident know I tell the whole story of my wife and I. I wanted to show people what special operations spouses go through. It is a very hard career for our spouses. And so many people, my wife's the hero of that story. It ain't me. And a lot of people that have read the book recognize that. She has been through thick and thin, through the highs of my career, the lows of my career. My most critical nurse, when they brought me into the hospital and I was really struggling, she was the one that was like, we got this. So to be able to show more of her story, but bigger than that, everybody want to know, how have you guys done it? We run our businesses together. We've raised 3 amazing young adults. They want to know how we did it in a community that is staying married for longer than 20 years is the exception, definitely not the norm. I mean, we're divorce. I mean, special operations has a 90% divorce rate. Fire and police are 60 to 70%.
Yeah.
So yeah, we finally wrote all that down, and it's I'm really excited about this book. It's called Mission Invincible Marriage. And it is broken into 3 parts. Number 1 is mission. Mm-hmm. You need to approach your marriage like it's a no-fail mission. And I don't think a lot do. I don't think they come into it and they establish this is our mission. These are our values. This is the foundation of who we are. It's not me, it's we. And that has to be very critical from the beginning. You have to have that unit mindset, but now it's applied to your marriage, your most important teammate. Number 2 is training. You're 2 different people, man. You communicate different. You have different wants. You different languages. That has to constantly be addressed. We're constantly training in special operations. It's the same for your marriage, man. It doesn't magically happen. You have to put the work in and train. How does that happen? Date night, communicating, all these different things that are constantly evolving as you're moving forward in this life. And then the last one is Under Fire. We talked about that before. How do you fight? How do you deal with failure? How do you deal with problems? So the book's laid out that way. Super excited. Gary Sinise wrote an amazing foreword for us.
When's it drop?
February 25.
Okay.
Yeah. Hopefully right now they're talking about Valentine's Day drop. And we're going to launch a podcast where we're going to interviewing amazing couples that are out there. Marriage is on the decline in America. We're at a 50% divorce rate in our country. And there are people who are trying to say, oh, Western values in marriage, like that's not that big a deal. I don't believe that. God intended us to have an amazing partner in this life. And if you truly find the right one for you, man, I would not be who I am today and where I am today without my wife, Erica. And for anybody that out there, maybe you're already divorced. It's not too late. I meet a lot of people who they had a bad relationship. And they're like, I'm never, ever dating again. Well, I there's someone out there for you if you're willing. And I think God wants all of us to have an amazing partner. So we want this book hopefully to help others out, those looking and those already in a relationship.
And your other two books, The Trident and Overcome.
Yep.
Those are out, and you can get them anywhere books are sold.
Yep. If you want signed copies, go to jasonredman.com. I will personalize them. My team sets them out and send them out. Yeah, man.
Awesome.
And then we're going to be doing speaking training. So that's coming next year. I'm launching an online course to help people. And maybe you and I can be doing some things too.
We could do. There's a lot of stuff we could be doing together. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Locking arms and stuff. But all that, jasonredman.com.
That's right.
And then follow you up. But man, you got to if you're not following Jason on Instagram, you got to follow him. He's got a great Instagram. And,
thanks, brother.
Yeah. Man, it was so awesome to have you on. I look forward to just continue to lock arms and do stuff together, man.
Yeah, brother. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for continuing to put out the positive message.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right. Hey, till next week, guys. Hey guys, thank you for watching this episode of The Resilient Show. I hope you enjoyed it. If you hadn't already, please click subscribe so you don't miss any future content. We have so many amazing guests scheduled and you don't want to miss it.